I am Anna Stove, 25 years old, from Miami. And today, as I stood in the crowd watching her bask in the applause for a story I wrote, I felt something inside me finally shatter. The bright stage lights shimmered over her designer dress. The one she always bragged was custom, though I knew it was borrowed. Her smile stretched wide, perfect for the cameras. "Thank you all for supporting my debut novel," she said into the microphone, voice dripping with fake humility. My debut novel, my story, my words. I stood frozen in the back of the ballroom, clutching the edge of my clutch so tightly that the metal clasp dug into my palm. The banner behind her read, "Book Launch, The Echo of Dusk" by Isla Rivera, the title I'd chosen. The story I'd written in a sleepless haze over 8 long months, the same story she had stolen. "Isla, how did you come up with such a heartfelt story?" a reporter shouted. She tilted her head in mock thought before answering sweetly. "It came to me one night when I was thinking about loss, about love and redemption. It's my most personal work." A hollow laugh tried to crawl up my throat. She was quoting me, word for word from the note I'd once written her when we were friends, before she took everything. I could almost hear her voice from that night. "Anna, you have something special. You just need more confidence." I trusted her. She was my mentor, my editor, and my best friend, or so I thought. The applause echoed as Isla stepped off the stage, reporters swarming her with flashing lights. I watched her sign copies, the fake smile never faltering. I wanted to scream, to rip that stage apart. But instead, I turned away quietly. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. The betrayal wasn't instant. It started subtly, with borrowed drafts, suggested edits, late-night calls where she'd ask to review my manuscripts before submission. I thought she cared. I thought she believed in me. Then came the rejections. Publisher after publisher turning me away, claiming my writing lacked originality. I didn't understand, not until I saw her book deal announcement 6 months later. Every line she read tonight, every quote printed in that glossy hardcover, belonged to me, and she knew it. When she spotted me across the room after the launch, her smile flickered, only for a second, before she recovered. "Anna, you came," she said, walking toward me with feigned delight. I forced a small smile. "Of course, Isla. I wouldn't miss it." Her eyes glittered with something darker than pride, power. "It means so much that you support me," she said, squeezing my hand just hard enough to remind me she had already won. "Always," I replied softly. My silence, the same silence she once mocked, was all I could offer. But what she didn't know was that this silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was strategy. On my way home that night, Miami's skyline blurred past my taxi window. I pressed my forehead against the glass, the city lights flickering like taunts. My phone buzzed, messages from friends and acquaintances flooding in. "Isn't that your story? She stole your work, Anna. Do something. You can't let her get away with this." But they didn't understand. Isla wasn't just any writer, she was connected. Her uncle owned the publishing house. Her friends worked in PR. One wrong move from me, and she'd crush my name before I even had a chance to rise. So I stayed quiet. For now. When I reached my small apartment, I walked straight to my desk, the same wooden one I'd bought secondhand when I couldn't afford new furniture. Stacks of old drafts covered the surface, along with notebooks filled with scribbled dialogue and outlines. I flipped open the drawer, and there it was, my original manuscript, stamped with the words, "Rejected. Similar work exists. Similar work." That was the night I made a promise to myself. If she wanted the spotlight, she could keep it, for now. But I would make sure that when it went dark, everyone would know whose light it really was. The following weeks were a blur. Isla's book exploded across social media. Every interview, every podcast, every talk show introduced her as the next literary phenomenon. She smiled and nodded, pretending to be humbled by success. And then, The worst part, the book started winning awards. When she took home Debut of the Year, I watched from my living room, clutching my coffee cup so hard it cracked. She stood on stage, tears glimmering as she said, "I dedicate this to all aspiring writers out there. Never give up." I nearly threw the mug at the TV. Never give up? She'd given up long ago. On integrity, on honesty, on friendship. One night, I received an email from a small online magazine I'd once sent my drafts to. The editor, an older man named Joseph, had written, "Anna, I've been following the Isla Rivera book controversy. Some readers online noticed similarities between her story and a piece we published from you 2 years ago. Are you aware of this?" My pulse quickened. I clicked the attached link. It led to a Reddit thread. Hundreds of readers were comparing her book to my short story. The comments were ruthless. She plagiarized. It's the same plot. Check the original by Anna Stove. For the first time in months, I smiled. The world was starting to notice. That night, I opened my laptop and began typing. Not another story, but something far more dangerous. A confession, not mine, hers, because I had proof. Draft emails, timestamps, voice messages where she'd asked me to let her polish a few chapters before submission. Every lie she'd told was sitting in my inbox, waiting for the perfect moment. And I knew exactly when that would be. As I saved the files into a hidden folder labeled Dusk Returns, I whispered to myself. She thought my silence was weakness. I looked at my reflection in the dark laptop screen. Eyes burning, lips curling into a faint smile. But this time, silence is my weapon. The first signs of betrayal are never loud. They creep in softly, disguised as care, disguised as love. That's how Isla began to sink her claws into my writing, one helpful suggestion at a time. It started the summer I finished my first full manuscript. I remember sitting across from her at Café Loom, my laptop open, heart pounding as I handed her my story, The Echo of Dusk. She smiled that perfect camera-ready smile. "Anna, you trust me, right?" she asked, stirring her coffee slowly. "Of course," I said, almost embarrassed she even needed to ask. "Then let me help you make this shine." She promised to edit it, to help polish the story before we sent it out to publishers. I was naive, flattered that someone like Isla Rivera, a well-known literary blogger, even wanted to help me. I didn't realize then that I had handed her my future. When she returned my draft a week later, it looked like a battlefield. "Red highlights everywhere. I just wanted to tighten your voice," she explained. "Publishers love concise writing." She had changed entire passages, replaced my emotional monologues with detached, sterile sentences. My characters didn't sound like mine anymore, but I told myself she knew better. "You're improving," she said once, "but maybe tone down the emotional parts. They feel too personal." I did. I trusted her, but every time she helped, my stories lost a little more of me. I began noticing something strange. She started quoting lines from my manuscripts during her workshops, not crediting me, of course. She'd say things like, one of my protégés once wrote, "Grief isn't loud. It's the silence after everyone leaves. Isn't that beautiful?" Everyone nodded in awe. My stomach would twist every time I heard it, but I never said anything. I didn't want to seem ungrateful. When she invited me to her writing circle, I thought it meant she was proud of me. But it was never about sharing. It was about control. She'd tear apart my work in front of others, always smiling sweetly while she did it. This scene is too indulgent. "Anna, you can't make readers feel pity for you." The others laughed softly, agreeing because they didn't dare disagree with her when, during a reading night, she asked me to share a piece. I read a short excerpt from The Echo of Dusk. My voice shook, but the room was quiet. People were listening. For a brief moment, I felt proud. Then Isla leaned forward, smirking. "Doesn't it sound familiar?" she asked, turning to the others. "Reminds me of something I wrote years ago." The laughter that followed still burns in my memory. My face flushed. My throat went dry. I wanted to disappear. After that night, I stopped attending the sessions. Isla messaged me constantly. Don't be sensitive. Writers need to toughen up. You'll thank me one day. I told myself she meant well. But deep down, I felt smaller every time she spoke. By the time I finished rewriting The Echo of Dusk, I was exhausted. Isla offered to submit it to publishers for me through her contacts. I agreed. She said she'd handle the paperwork, and when I asked to see the email chain, she waved me off. Trust me, Anna. I know how this works. Weeks passed, then months. Each time I asked, she'd reply, "They're reviewing it. Don't worry." Until one day she sighed and said, "They passed, Anna. Said it wasn't marketable." I cried that night. My first full book, my heart and soul. Dismissed with a single word. She comforted me, bought me dinner, told me to keep trying. And like a fool, I believed her. Then, one afternoon at a small publishing event, I overheard a conversation that shattered everything. Two editors were chatting at the coffee table. Unaware I was right behind them. Isla Rivera's debut, The Echo of Dusk. Brilliant stuff. She's got a voice that feels so raw, so real. My cup slipped from my hand, splattering coffee across the floor. "Sorry," I mumbled, rushing to the restroom before they could notice my trembling. Inside the stall, I pulled out my phone and searched her name. There it was. A press release. Renowned blogger Isla Rivera signs debut novel deal with Sunvale Press. The book, The Echo of Dusk, is set to release next year. My knees buckled. I slid down onto the cold tile, phone glowing in my hands, my story, my title, my everything. I confronted her that night. My hands shook as I dialed her number. She picked up, her voice bright. "Hey, Anna. What's up? How could you?" I whispered, a pause. "What are you talking about?" "My book," I said, choking on the words. "You published my book under your name," she sighed. "Anna, listen. You're being dramatic. The story was a collaboration, remember? You said I could revise it freely. I never said you could take my name off it." "You never said I couldn't," she replied coolly. "And honestly, I rewrote half of it. It wouldn't have sold otherwise." My chest felt hollow. "You stole from me," she laughed softly. "You really think someone like you could have gotten published without me?" Click. I hung up before she could say more, tears blurring my vision. From that day forward, she ghosted me, blocked me, unfriended me, erased every trace of our friendship online. And every interview she gave, every article about her success, twisted the knife deeper. She told the world she'd struggled for years before writing her masterpiece. She even claimed she wrote it during a time of heartbreak and loss. My heartbreak, my loss. The people around me started to turn too. Some believed her. Others avoided me altogether. "She's jealous," I overheard one of her friends say. "She's trying to ride Isla's fame." I stopped writing for a while. Every time I tried to start a new story, her voice echoed in my mind. "You'll never make it without me." But that's the thing about silence. It doesn't stay empty forever. It grows heavy. It listens, and one day, it starts to plan. As months passed, I worked at a small bookstore downtown, shelving novels with names that mocked me. Every book cover was a reminder of the dream she'd stolen. But I also found peace among the quiet pages, a space where I could think. That's where the idea came to me. Not revenge. Not yet, but something deeper. If she could take my words, maybe I could take something bigger. Her truth. That night, I went back to my old laptop and began gathering everything. Drafts, emails, text messages, audio clips. Each piece of evidence was a wound reopened, but also a weapon forged. I didn't know when or how I'd use them yet, but I knew one thing for sure. Isla Rivera would regret ever calling my silence weakness, because I was done being quiet. The night I hit my breaking point, Miami was silent under the weight of summer rain. The streets gleamed with reflections of neon signs, the sound of thunder rolling far off over the water. I sat by my window, laptop open, eyes fixed on Isla's latest interview. She was on national television now, Good Morning America. Her hair perfectly curled, her posture regal, her lies smoother than silk. I've always believed that stories heal people, she said with a soft smile. Writing The Echo of Dusk helped me recover from a really toxic friendship. My stomach turned. Toxic friendship. She was talking about me. The interviewer leaned in. That sounds painful. Do you still talk to this friend? Isla's lips curled into a sympathetic frown. No, she couldn't handle my success. Some people just break when they see others rise. That's when I broke. I slammed my laptop shut and pressed both hands against my face. For months, I had told myself that staying quiet was strength, that silence was dignity. But at that moment, dignity tasted a lot like defeat. I threw on a hoodie, grabbed my keys, and drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to move, to breathe, to not think. Rain streaked across the windshield like a blur of tears, and the city around me felt cruelly alive. When I finally stopped, I was parked outside the same cafe where it all began, Cafe Loom. The smell of coffee and baked bread still lingered even through the downpour. I sat there for a long time, staring through the glass at the table we used to share. That's when I saw her, Isla, laughing, animated, surrounded by people, her new team. A publisher, a PR manager, a photographer. Her laughter rang through the glass like a blade pressed to my throat. She looked happy, powerful, untouchable. I almost left, but something inside me, the part she had tried to break, refused to stay quiet any longer. I stepped out into the rain. The doorbell jingled as I entered, and every head turned. Isla froze mid-laugh. The cafe suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. Anna, she said finally, that fake warmth melting from her face. Didn't expect to see you here. I'm sure you didn't, I replied, my voice calm but my heart pounding. Her friends looked between us, sensing tension. Isla, one man whispered, everything okay? Fine, she said quickly. This is an old acquaintance. Acquaintance? I echoed. Funny. That's not what you called me when I was writing your novel. Her jaw tightened. Excuse me? Oh, don't do that, I said quietly. Don't pretend you don't know exactly what you did. The cafe had gone silent. Every eye was on us. The sound of rain drummed harder against the windows. Anna, she hissed under her breath. This isn't the time or place. Maybe not, I said, my voice shaking but steady. But you've stolen enough of my time, and my name. Her PR manager tried to step in. Ma'am, we should stay out of this, she snapped. Then turning to me, she whispered, You're ruining yourself right now. I smiled. For the first time, genuinely. No, I'm just getting started. Then I walked out, leaving her standing in stunned silence. That confrontation didn't fix anything. But it woke something in me, something raw and unstoppable. When I got home, I sat down with a notebook and began to write. Not another story, not yet, but a confession of my own. Everything she had done. Every message, every stolen line, every lie. I poured it all out like poison leaving my veins. It wasn't rage that drove me anymore. It was truth. For the next few weeks, I spent every spare moment collecting proof. I went through old hard drives, emails, text messages. I even found an old audio recording, a voice memo where she'd said, Let me send it under my name first, just to test the waters. If it sells, we'll share the credit. She never shared. When I listened to that clip, I felt tears rise. Not of sadness this time, but relief. Finally something real, something I could use, but revenge isn't clean. It eats at you. It makes you paranoid. I started dreaming about her laughing as she tore my name off a manuscript. I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, half tempted to give up. Every time that happened, I'd look at the recording on my laptop and whisper to myself, not yet. Then came the turning point, an email from a journalist. Hi, Anna. This is Lila from Miami Daily. I came across an online thread comparing your old work to Isla Rivera's novel. I'd love to speak with you about it. I stared at the screen for a long time. I could almost hear Isla's voice in my head. You'll ruin yourself if you go public. No one will believe you. Maybe she was right. She had fame, I had screenshots. But then I thought about every time she'd humiliated me, every time she'd taken credit for something that came from my heart. So I typed back, "Yes, I'm ready to talk." The next morning, we met at the same cafe. Poetic, really. Lila was young, sharp, with the kind of curiosity that made people nervous. I told her everything, showing her proof. The drafts, the emails, the timestamps, the recordings. Her eyes widened. "Anna, this is undeniable. You realize if this goes public, it could destroy her career?" I smiled faintly. "Good," Lila hesitated. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" I looked down at my coffee, the steam curling upward like smoke. She built her empire on my silence. I think it's time I burned it down. That evening, after Lila left, I sat alone watching the sun sink behind the Miami skyline. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I was doing something dangerous, something irreversible. For the first time, I didn't care. A week later, the story dropped. Best-selling author Isla Rivera accused of plagiarism. Whistleblower provides proof. The internet exploded. Comments, tweets, videos. Everyone had an opinion. Some defended her, but most were furious. Her publisher released a statement saying they were reviewing the allegations. And me? I didn't celebrate. I didn't sleep. I just sat in my apartment staring at the chaos I'd unleashed. Part of me was terrified. The other part whispered, "It's about time." Then my phone rang. Her name flashed on the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Anna," she said, her voice trembling for the first time. "What have you done?" I leaned back, calm now. "You always said I'd never make it without you, Isla. Turns out I didn't need to. You've ruined me." She screamed. "No," I said quietly. "You did that yourself." Click. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months because I finally realized breaking point isn't where you collapse. It's where you stop letting others write your story. The days after the article went live felt like being caught in a storm that never stopped spinning. At first, I thought exposing Isla would bring me peace, maybe even vindication. But what came instead was noise. Endless, exhausting noise. Social media exploded. Comment sections filled with strangers arguing about my life. Some believed me, calling me brave. Others said I was jealous, a nobody trying to destroy someone successful. She's just bitter. Why didn't she speak up sooner if it's true? Typical failed writer drama. Every time I opened my phone, the words blurred into static. I deleted my accounts within 3 days. The first week after the scandal broke, I stopped sleeping. The calls wouldn't stop. Reporters, podcasts, even documentary producers wanting interviews. I turned them all down. I didn't want fame. I just wanted my name back. But instead, I got silence from the people who once called me friend. Even my boss at the bookstore avoided eye contact. "It's best you take some time off, Anna," he muttered one morning, not looking up from the counter. I nodded. I understood. My presence had become too controversial. That night, I sat on my couch, knees drawn to my chest, watching the rain slide down the window. My phone buzzed again, another number I didn't recognize. I didn't answer. Then came a message from an unknown email. "You've made a mistake, Anna. You don't know what I'm capable of." No name. But I didn't need one. I knew that voice even in text. Isla fear settled in my stomach like stone. She wasn't going to stay silent anymore. 2 days later, she went live on Instagram. Millions watched as she cried into the camera, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "I'm being attacked," she said softly. "Someone I once tried to help has turned on me. She's lying because she couldn't handle rejection. I never stole anyone's work. I just inspired her." The comments flooded in with hearts and sympathy. "We love you, Isla. Stay strong, queen." And just like that, the tide shifted again. I couldn't leave my apartment without feeling eyes on me. I heard whispers in grocery store aisles. I saw my face on tabloids in the checkout line. Wannabe writer tries to ruin best-selling author. It was surreal, like living inside a nightmare I couldn't wake from. My rent was due, my savings almost gone. The bookstore didn't call me back. Publishers ignored my queries. Even my old writing group had gone silent. For weeks, I didn't write a single word. I just sat in that suffocating quiet, wondering if maybe Isla was right. Maybe I was nothing without her. But then, one night, when the silence got too heavy to bear, I went digging through my old drafts. I found a notebook I hadn't opened in years, back when I still wrote for love, not approval. Inside, on the first page, I had written a quote. "They can steal your words, but not your voice." I didn't remember writing it, but it felt like it had been waiting for me. A whisper from the version of me that still believed. I stayed up all night writing again. Not revenge, not another expose, just me. For the first time since the betrayal, I remembered what it felt like to love storytelling. Still, life outside the pages wasn't forgiving. My landlord started leaving notes about overdue rent. Friends avoided my calls. One evening, I found graffiti on my apartment door. "Liar" scrawled in red marker. I wanted to give up. Pack my things, disappear. But every time I thought about quitting, I remembered the look in Isla's eyes that night at the cafe. That smug certainty that I'd never rise again, that thought kept me alive. Then came the lowest moment. A journalist published a follow-up piece claiming to have uncovered inconsistencies in my story. They said my evidence was inconclusive, that Isla's team denied everything and threatened legal action. It didn't matter that the recordings were real. It didn't matter that my drafts were time-stamped years before her book deal. Her lawyers knew how to twist reality until it bent in her favor. My phone buzzed with a message from an old college friend. "Anna, maybe just let this go." "You don't want to get sued. Let it go." The phrase haunted me. How easily people said it when it wasn't their name being dragged through the mud. That night, I walked to the beach. The sky was bruised purple, the air thick with salt. I sat on the sand, pulling my knees close as waves crashed in the distance. I thought about deleting everything. The emails, the recordings, the story itself. Pretend it never happened. But then I imagined Isla, years from now, on another stage, another book tour, still telling my stories, while I disappeared into anonymity. No, I refused to let that be my ending. The next morning, I reached out to Joseph, the small magazine editor who had first believed me. I told him everything that had happened. He sighed over the phone. "Anna, the truth's messy, but it always finds its way out. You just need to survive long enough for people to see it." "Survive?" I asked, half laughing, half crying. "Yes," he said. "You've already started. Now you finish." His words settled deep inside me. That was the first time I realized I wasn't fighting to destroy Isla. I was fighting to rebuild me. So I went back to work, quietly, deliberately. I started writing again under a pseudonym. I sent a short story to a small independent journal using a fake name. The story wasn't about betrayal. It was about a woman rebuilding herself after losing everything. A month later, the editor emailed me. "We're publishing your story next issue. It's raw, honest, unforgettable." I stared at the message for a long time, tears finally spilling over, not because I'd won, but because I'd remembered who I was before Isla tried to define me. When the issue came out, it didn't go viral. It didn't make headlines, but it reached people. I saw messages in the comments section. People saying the story made them cry, that they saw themselves in it. For the first time since all of it began, I smiled without bitterness. I was still broke. Still exhausted. Still fighting shadows of rumors that wouldn't die. But I wasn't invisible anymore. And that was enough to keep going. It's strange how power doesn't arrive in a flash of lightning. Sometimes, it sneaks in quietly, disguised as opportunity. After my story got published in that small journal under a fake name, something inside me shifted. For the first time in years, I felt like a writer again. I reread the piece every night before bed, whispering the words to myself like a prayer. Then one morning, I opened my inbox and found an email titled, "Your story moved me. I have an offer." It was from a woman named Celia Tran, an editor at an up-and-coming publishing house that specialized in raw, emotional memoirs. "Your writing feels authentic, brave, and vulnerable," she wrote. Would you ever consider expanding it into a full-length book? My heart raced. The idea both thrilled and terrified me. I typed back hesitantly, "Thank you. I'd love to, but I'm not sure I can publish under my name right now." Within minutes, she replied, "That's fine. Let the story speak first. The name can come later." For weeks, I poured everything I had into that book. Everything. The pain, the fear, the betrayal, the strength I'd clawed back from the ashes. I called it A Quiet Fire. Writing it felt different from before. It wasn't about revenge anymore, not entirely. It was about reclaiming my narrative. Some nights, I'd sit at my desk until dawn, typing through tears, whispering to the ghosts of my past, "You don't get to win." When I finished the final chapter, I stared at the document for hours before hitting send. Celia called me 2 days later, her voice brimming with excitement. "Anna, or should I say Nora, since we're keeping your name hidden, this is one of the most powerful manuscripts I've read in years." "Nora," I repeated softly, testing the name on my tongue. It felt safe, it felt free. Months passed, and A Quiet Fire started to spread like smoke through the literary world. Small blogs wrote about it. Book clubs began discussing it. People online whispered about this mysterious author who'd bared her soul without ever revealing her identity. Ironically, I watched it all unfold from the shadows, the same way Isla once made me watch her success. But this time, the difference was mine was built on truth, not theft. And then something unexpected happened. Celia called one afternoon, her voice trembling. "Anna, Isla Rivera just mentioned your book on social media." My heart stopped. "What?" She tweeted about it, Celia said. She said, "Whoever wrote A Quiet Fire understands heartbreak better than anyone I know. A masterpiece." I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. The woman who had stolen my words was now praising me, completely unaware that I was the writer she envied. That's when I realized the universe had handed me something powerful, poetic, justice wrapped in irony. But it wasn't enough. Not yet, because no one knew why A Quiet Fire felt so real. No one knew the truth behind it, and part of me still wanted the world to see that truth. To see me. A few weeks later, A Quiet Fire hit the bestseller list. The publishing house wanted to do a reveal of the mysterious author, but I hesitated. Fame had never been kind to me. That's when Celia came to me with a proposition. "Anna, what if we reveal your identity and tell your story your way? Not a scandal piece and a documentary. Your words, your voice, your truth." My first instinct was fear. Isla had an army of lawyers, a polished reputation, and enough influence to bury me again. But the idea haunted me. I imagined sitting in front of a camera, finally saying, "This is who I am. This is what she did." The thought both terrified and thrilled me. So I said yes. The first time I sat under the studio lights, my hands were shaking. The director asked, "Can you tell us what the echo of dusk means to you?" I looked at the camera, at the world watching through that lens, and said, "It was my story." She just told it first. They filmed for hours. Every word I'd kept buried came pouring out. The late nights, the betrayal, the humiliation, the silence, and finally the rebirth. When the documentary trailer dropped, it spread like wildfire. Anonymous author of A Quiet Fire revealed as victim of literary theft. The internet went insane again, but this time the tone was different. People weren't laughing. They were listening. I sat at home watching it unfold, trembling with disbelief. Messages flooded in. Not hate this time, but love. "Your story gave me courage. I've been silenced too. Thank you for speaking up. You're my inspiration." I hadn't expected that. I thought I wanted revenge, but what I got was connection. And maybe that was stronger. Of course, Isla didn't take it well. She posted a statement calling me a liar, a manipulator, a woman obsessed with attention. But this time, her words didn't land. People saw through it. They'd seen the evidence. They'd seen me. A journalist tweeted, "Isla Rivera's silence speaks louder than her denials." Her publishers quietly suspended her contracts. Brands dropped her sponsorships. She deleted her accounts. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. Instead, I went to the beach, the same one where I once thought about giving up, and stood barefoot in the sand, watching the tide roll in. The world had finally heard my voice, and she could no longer drown it out. A week later, Celia called again. "Anna," she said, her voice soft. "We've been invited to the Miami Book Awards. A Quiet Fire has been nominated for Best Debut Nonfiction." I laughed, tears in my eyes. "You're kidding." "No, and this time, you're not hiding." I hung up and stared out the window for a long moment, the sunlight painting gold streaks across my wall. For years, Isla had taken my story from me. But now, I had written a new one she couldn't touch. The night before the Miami Book Awards, I couldn't sleep. My apartment was littered with open boxes, dresses draped over furniture, and notes scattered across my desk. Every outfit I tried on felt like armor that didn't fit right. Too loud, too quiet, too... Not me. Tomorrow wasn't just an award show. It was the first time the world would see me. Not the nameless writer, not the victim behind headlines, but Anna Stove. The woman who had been silenced, erased, and humiliated. Finally stepping into the light, but I wasn't naive. I knew Isla would be there too. Celia had warned me earlier that week. She RSVP'd at the last minute, she said, her voice low, probably hoping to control the narrative again. I had laughed bitterly. Of course she did. She's built her life on pretending she's in control. But truthfully, the thought of facing Isla in public made my stomach twist into knots. She wasn't just a person to me anymore. She was the living symbol of everything I'd lost. Still, I had a plan. That morning, Miami glowed gold under the sun. The ocean breeze rolled through the streets as limousines lined up outside the Coral Grand Hotel, where the event was being held. Celebrities, authors, publishers, everyone in the industry had come to see the literary elite. When I arrived, cameras flashed, lights blinding. For a split second, I froze at the edge of the red carpet, clutching the clutch Celia had insisted I bring. She squeezed my shoulder gently. "You ready?" she whispered. I took a deep breath and smiled. I've been ready for years. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and velvet-draped tables. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, champagne glasses clinking as everyone mingled. I could feel eyes on me, whispers following like shadows. There she is. That's the author from the documentary. She's the one Isla stole from, right? She looks calmer than I expected. Every word felt like both a cut and a crown. Then, across the room, I saw her, Isla Rivera, perfectly polished, in a silver gown that caught every light. Her hair cascaded down her shoulders like liquid gold. She smiled at someone, but when her gaze met mine, the smile faltered, only for a second. That second was enough. During the cocktail hour, she made her move first. She glided toward me with that same calculated grace I once mistook for confidence. "Anna," she greeted, her tone smooth as glass. Or should I say Nora? Quite the comeback. I turned to her slowly. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Oh, please," she chuckled softly. "I'm nominated too, remember? Not everyone turned on me." Her eyes glimmered with something sharp. "You've made quite the career out of playing the victim. Congratulations." I tilted my head. "And you've made one out of playing the hero. Funny how the truth ruins the script." The air between us tightened. People nearby pretended not to listen, but I could feel their attention like heat on my skin. Isla leaned closer. "Enjoy your 15 minutes, Anna. Fame fades faster than forgiveness." I smiled faintly. "Then it's a good thing I'm not here for fame." She frowned, confused. I didn't give her the satisfaction of explanation, because what Isla didn't know was that I had already outmaneuvered her. A week earlier, Celia and I had quietly coordinated with the event organizers. I had agreed to give a short speech if I won, and I planned to use that moment not just to thank people, but to reclaim everything she took. No scandals. No screaming matches. Just truth, in front of every camera in the room. The evening stretched on in a blur of applause, speeches, and polite laughter. I barely tasted the food. Every nerve in my body buzzed with anticipation. When they finally announced my category, Best Debut Nonfiction, my heart slammed against my ribs. The winner is... The presenter paused, smiling. A Quiet Fire, by Anna Stove. The applause hit me like a wave. I sat frozen for half a second as Celia nudged me up, tears in her eyes. "Go," she whispered. "Go claim it." The stage lights were blinding. My heels clicked softly on the wooden steps as I approached the podium. The golden award felt heavy in my hands, heavier than I expected. I looked out into the crowd. Faces blurred in the glow, but I saw her clearly, Isla, frozen in her seat, her jaw tight, eyes wide. I took a breath. When I started writing A Quiet Fire, I began, my voice trembling at first. I didn't think anyone would ever read it. I wrote it because I needed to remember who I was, because someone tried very hard to make me forget. The room went still. Cameras zoomed in. Isla's expression flickered between fury and fear. I was told to stay quiet. I continued, steadier now, to let it go. But silence doesn't protect you. It buries you. And the only way I learned to breathe again was by telling the truth, even when no one wanted to hear it. There was a murmur in the audience. I smiled softly. So to anyone who's ever been erased, by a boss, a lover, a friend, don't let them write your story for you. Take back the pen. Applause erupted, loud, genuine, overwhelming. I glanced at Isla one last time. She didn't clap. She just sat there, face pale, mask cracking under the weight of the moment. And that was enough. After the ceremony, people swarmed me, publishers, journalists, fans. Flashbulbs went off, microphones thrust forward. "How does it feel to finally win after everything you've been through?" one reporter asked. I smiled, tears threatening to spill. It feels like freedom. Later that night, I slipped outside to breathe. The ocean breeze was cool against my skin, the sound of waves faint beyond the hotel. I leaned against the railing, staring at the city lights dancing across the water. A voice broke the silence behind me. "You think this is over?" I turned. Isla stood there, her makeup smudged, her tone venomous. "No," I said calmly. "It's just beginning." She stepped closer, her voice low. "You'll regret this." I met her eyes, unflinching. "Maybe. But at least I won't regret staying silent." I turned and walked away, for the last time. That night, I placed the Golden Award on my desk beside my old notebook, the one with the words that started it all. They can steal your words, but not your voice. I ran my fingers over the inscription and whispered, "Not anymore," because for the first time in years, I wasn't chasing revenge. I was living it. The morning after the Miami Book Awards felt like waking up in a new lifetime. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages, calls, mentions, tags. Every corner of the internet vibrating with my name, Anna Stove. Not the nameless writer, not the woman behind the scandal. Just me. The clip of my acceptance speech had gone viral overnight. Someone had uploaded it to Twitter with the caption, "She stood where her thief once stood, and told the world the truth." It had millions of views before noon, and just like that, the balance shifted. By midday, journalists were calling Isla's publishers. Readers demanded statements. Old fans started rereading The Echo of Dusk, posting side-by-side comparisons of my old blog drafts and passages from her novel. Thread after thread dissected her career. Every original line, every inspiration, every borrowed idea. It wasn't just me anymore. The world had picked up my fight. Celia called as I sat on my couch, laptop open, fingers trembling over the keyboard. "Anna," she said, almost breathless, "you've started something bigger than revenge. You've started a movement." I laughed softly. "I didn't mean to." "I know," she said. "But that's what makes it powerful." By evening, major media outlets had picked up the story. New York Times. Rising author accuses bestseller of plagiarism, and the evidence is devastating. Entertainment. Weekly. From Obscurity to Justice, the woman who exposed a literary fraud. Every headline felt like a reversal of gravity, the years of being ignored, erased, forgotten, all unraveling in real time. But not everyone was happy about it. 2 days later, I got an email from Isla's legal team. Ms. Rivera intends to pursue defamation charges unless you retract your statements. I read it twice, then smiled. She was still trying to scare me into silence. I forwarded the email to Celia and Joseph with a single line. Let her try. They both replied within minutes. Joseph with a lawyer recommendation, Celia with a screenshot of public support campaigns already forming in my defense. Stand with Anna was trending. That same night, the producers of the Quiet Fire documentary contacted me. Anna, they said, we're scheduling a follow-up special. People want to hear from you again, especially after last week's speech. Would you be willing to come back? I hesitated for half a second before replying, yes, but this time I want it live. They agreed. The broadcast was set for the following Friday. The studio was colder than I remembered. Cameras hung like watchful eyes, bright lights washing out the space. I sat across from the host, a calm, sharp-eyed woman named Maya Cole. When the red light blinked on, she smiled at the camera. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're speaking with Anna Stove, the author of A Quiet Fire, whose story has taken the world by storm. The audience applauded softly. Anna, she began, you've faced enormous backlash, but also incredible support. How does it feel to be here now, vindicated? I took a breath. Vindication feels quieter than I expected. I thought it would roar, but it whispers instead. It's peace, not triumph, she nodded. And what would you say to Isla Rivera, if she were watching right now? The question hung heavy in the air. I turned toward the camera, imagining her sitting somewhere. Maybe in her penthouse, maybe surrounded by publicists, watching me reclaim the narrative again. I'd say, I began softly, thank you. Because without you, I might never have found my real voice. But don't mistake gratitude for forgiveness. You built your fame on my silence. And now I'm taking it back. The audience erupted in applause. Maya smiled faintly. That was powerful. What happened next? No one saw coming. Midway through the interview, as the live chat scrolled endlessly on the screen beside me, a message flashed across the monitor. From an anonymous account, she's lying again. She stole from me too. The control room buzzed with confusion. Maya frowned, trying to continue. But messages began pouring in. More and more people claiming that Isla had stolen their work too. 1. A young writer from Argentina uploaded screenshots of her unpublished manuscript that matched paragraphs from Isla's second novel. Another from India posted drafts of poems that had been lifted word for word. The evidence was damning. And this time, the world wasn't ignoring it. Within hours, Isla Rivera exposed was everywhere. The next morning, Isla released a shaky apology video, the same tear-streaked performance she'd given 100 times before. But this time, no one bought it. Her publishers dropped her within a day. Her brand sponsors pulled their deals. By the end of the week, bookstores were pulling her titles off shelves, and in the middle of that chaos, A Quiet Fire climbed to the #1 spot on the national bestseller list. I didn't celebrate. I just sat on my balcony, coffee in hand, watching the Miami sunrise. The sky was streaked with orange and pink, the city slowly waking beneath me. I thought about how strange justice was, how it didn't always shout. Sometimes it simply unfolded. Celia called later that morning, excitement bubbling in her voice. Anna, they want you on Good Morning America. You're the face of creative integrity now, the voice for every silenced writer. I smiled faintly. The voice, I repeated. That's all I ever wanted. She laughed softly. So, what's next? I looked out over the horizon. Something new. Something that's mine. A few days later, I visited the bookstore where I used to work, the one that had quietly let me go after the first scandal. The bell above the door chimed as I stepped in. The owner, Mr. Halpern, froze behind the counter when he saw me. Anna, he stammered. I didn't think... It's okay, I said gently. I just came to buy something. He nodded nervously. Of course. I walked to the nonfiction section and pulled a familiar cover from the shelf. A Quiet Fire. My name glimmered in gold lettering. When I brought it to the counter, he smiled awkwardly. Would you sign it? For the store, I nodded. Of course. As I scrawled my name inside, I added a small note beneath it. To anyone who's ever been told their voice doesn't matter, it does. He read it, eyes glassy. You've come a long way, Anna, I smiled. No, I said softly. I finally came home. That evening, I posted a photo online, the signed copy, sitting on the same shelf where Isla's books once stood. My caption was simple. The story always finds its way back to the one who lived it. It was the final strike. Not out of vengeance, but closure. By the time the sun rose the next day, the world had changed. Every major network, magazine, and podcast wanted a piece of the story, my story. Headlines were no longer just about Isla Rivera's fall. They were about creative integrity, justice, and the quiet power of truth. It was surreal watching my name scroll across screens. Anna Stove, the voice that changed the literary world. But I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. Because public reckoning wasn't just about exposure, it was about accountability. The week following the live interview, Isla's world unraveled in front of millions. Her publishers formally terminated all contracts, citing ethical violations. Her agents dropped her. Bookstores removed her titles. Brands canceled partnerships. Even universities rescinded invitations to her writing workshops. Her empire, built on lies, plagiarism, and performance, was crumbling brick by brick. The poetic justice of it all should have made me giddy. But instead I felt a strange mixture of sadness and release. This wasn't just my revenge. It was the universe returning balance. Celia came over that morning with 2 cups of coffee and a grin that nearly split her face. Anna, you have to see this. She turned on the TV, and there it was. A panel discussion on national news titled Truth versus Talent, The Anna Stove Effect. 3 literary critics debated passionately, showing excerpts from both A Quiet Fire and The Echo of Dusk on screen. The similarities were undeniable. One of them, a gray-haired professor, said something that stuck with me. Plagiarism isn't just theft of words, it's theft of a voice. And when the rightful voice reclaims its power, the world listens. Celia looked at me, eyes glimmering. You've become a symbol, Anna. I shook my head. I never wanted to be one, she smiled gently. The best symbols never do. Within days, publishing houses began contacting me with offers. Talk shows wanted exclusive interviews. Universities invited me to speak. It was overwhelming. But what moved me most wasn't the fame. It was the messages. Hundreds of emails from writers, artists and creators who'd been silenced, dismissed, or betrayed. You reminded me that my story matters. I almost gave up. But seeing you stand tall changed me. Thank you for fighting for all of us. Reading them brought tears to my eyes. I realized that the revenge had evolved. It wasn't about Isla anymore. It was about restoring faith. In art, in honesty, in the power of persistence. But Isla, she didn't take her downfall quietly. She went live one night, a desperate attempt to win back sympathy. Her eyes were puffy, her voice hoarse. I made mistakes, she said shakily. But I'm not a monster. Anna's story isn't the whole truth. I watched from my couch, wrapped in a blanket, the blue light flickering across my face. She's exaggerating, Isla continued. I helped her. I gave her a platform. She's twisting it now for attention. Celia texted me as soon as it aired. Ignore her. The world knows the truth now. But part of me felt compelled to respond. Not out of anger, but closure. So, the next day, I recorded a short video for my followers. No production, no makeup, no rehearsed lines, just me, sitting at my desk with sunlight filtering through the blinds. I don't hate Isla, I began quietly. I don't even wish her harm. But I do wish she'd understand what she took from me. Not just my words, my years of silence, my confidence, my identity. This isn't about revenge, it's about truth. The video went viral within hours. And this time, the internet didn't turn it into chaos. It turned it into clarity. People started talking about ethics in art, fairness in competition, respect among creators. It became bigger than me, bigger than her. Then came the invitation that changed everything. An international literary foundation reached out. They were hosting a global summit on artistic integrity in the digital age. They wanted me to open the event. With a keynote speech, I accepted, standing. On that stage weeks later, in front of thousands of people from across the world, I felt the same flutter in my chest that I did when I first wrote A Quiet Fire. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was purpose. Art isn't a competition, I told the audience, my voice steady, clear. It's a mirror. When you break that mirror for fame, you're only left with sharp pieces, and eventually, you'll bleed from them. The crowd was silent. Cameras clicked softly. Then I smiled and added, but honesty rebuilds. It heals. And no matter how long it takes, truth finds its way home. The applause was thunderous. In that moment, I knew my revenge was complete. Not because Isla had fallen, but because I had risen beyond her reach. After the speech, a young woman approached me backstage. Her hands trembled as she clutched a notebook. "Miss Stove," she said softly. "I wanted to quit writing. People said I'd never make it, but then I read A Quiet Fire. I just wanted to say thank you." I smiled, fighting back tears. "Keep writing," I whispered. "The world needs your story," she nodded, eyes shining. "You're my reason to start again." That night, back in my hotel room, I opened my old journal, the one I'd started before Isla took everything. On the first page, I wrote 3 words, "It's over now." Then I closed it gently and placed it beside the award on the bedside table. The city lights shimmered outside my window, reflections gliding across the glass like ripples on water. Somewhere out there, Isla was probably still fighting to hold onto the remnants of her fame. But for me, peace had finally arrived. The public reckoning wasn't just hers, it was mine too. Because I had learned something profound. Revenge doesn't always roar with anger. Sometimes, it whispers in applause, in redemption, in the quiet certainty that you have nothing left to prove. The weeks following Isla's downfall moved slower than I expected. The chaos that had consumed my life for months, the noise, the headlines, the constant adrenaline, had begun to fade into silence. And for the first time in years, I didn't know what to do with the quiet. I spent mornings by the window, a cup of coffee warming my hands, sunlight spilling across the hardwood floor. The Golden Award sat on my shelf, a symbol of victory. Yet I couldn't help staring at it with mixed emotions. It wasn't that I regretted what happened. Isla's exposure had been inevitable, justice long overdue. But there was something haunting about success born from pain. Celia called almost every day, still buzzing from the whirlwind of opportunities. "Anna, Forbes wants an interview, and The Guardian just published a feature on you. Front page." I laughed softly. I never thought I'd say this, but I might be tired of seeing my name everywhere. She smiled through the phone. "You deserve this moment. Don't shrink from it." "I'm not shrinking," I replied quietly. "I'm just finally breathing." The more I reflected, the more I realized that revenge had been a kind of oxygen. It kept me alive when everything else had fallen apart. But now that I had justice, I needed to learn how to live beyond it. That was harder than I expected. I kept journals, page after page of thoughts, fears, questions. Sometimes I wrote letters I'd never send. One of them began, "Dear Isla, I should hate you, but I don't. You were my mirror, the part of me I refused to face. Thank you for showing me what I never want to become." A month after the public reckoning, I returned to Vermont for the first time in years. My parents had always been proud in quiet ways, the kind that never made it into words. But this time, when I pulled into their driveway, I saw my mother standing outside, waving a newspaper with my face on it. "You made it," she said, hugging me tightly. "Your father's been bragging to everyone at the diner." I laughed through tears. "He used to tell me writing was a nice hobby." "He still does," she chuckled. But now he says it about award-winning hobbies. Inside, my old room looked exactly the same. Pale blue walls, stacks of books. The same desk where I'd scribbled my earliest drafts. For the first time, it didn't feel like a place of failure. It felt like where everything began. That night, I found myself staring at the ceiling, listening to the crickets outside. My life had come full circle. The girl who once wrote in secret had become the woman who taught others to speak boldly. Back in Miami, Celia and I met at our favorite cafe by the water. She ordered her usual iced latte. I went for black coffee, no sugar, the way I drank it when I was writing A Quiet Fire. "So," she asked, stirring her drink, "what's next for you? A sequel? A film deal?" I smiled faintly. "Maybe neither. Maybe something simpler. I think I want to teach," she blinked. "Teach?" "Writing," I said. "Workshops, mentorships, for young writers who've been ignored or dismissed. I don't just want to tell my story. I want to help others tell theirs." Celia grinned. "That's actually perfect for you. I think it's perfect for who I've become." A few weeks later, I stood in a small classroom at the Miami Arts Center, facing a group of wide-eyed students holding notebooks and pens. They reminded me of myself. Nervous, hopeful, desperate to be seen. "Writing," I told them, "isn't about fame or applause. It's about survival. It's how we turn wounds into words." They scribbled notes furiously. One girl in the back raised her hand. "Did you ever want to give up?" I smiled softly. "Every day. But giving up would have meant letting someone else finish my story, and no one deserves that power but you." When class ended, they lined up to thank me. Small smiles, quiet gratitude. And in those faces, I saw 1,000 versions of the girl I used to be. Meanwhile, the news cycle moved on. The internet found new controversies, new scandals. Isla's name slowly faded into the background. Last I heard, she'd moved to Europe, away from the noise. I didn't keep track. I didn't need to. Her shadow no longer stretched into my light. One evening, I walked down to the beach alone. The sky was painted in hues of coral and lavender, the tide whispering secrets to the sand. I thought about the journey, the betrayal, the humiliation, the rage, and how all of it had forged me into something unbreakable. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you, universe, for everything," because even pain, when faced with courage, becomes art. The next morning, I got an email from Maya Cole, the host who'd interviewed me on live TV. "Anna, your honesty changed everything. We're starting a new series called The Storytellers, highlighting voices like yours. Real, resilient, revolutionary. Would you consider hosting it?" I read it twice, smiling in disbelief. Maybe life wasn't done surprising me yet. That night, I stood on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the city lights flicker across the water. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, calm, confident, free. Revenge had given me justice, but truth had given me peace, and peace, I realized, was the greatest power of all. I lifted my glass to the sky and whispered, "To beginnings that come from endings." Then I laughed, a real laugh, one that came from deep inside, because I had finally learned the lesson I'd been searching for all along. The world doesn't decide your worth. You do. I never thought peace would sound like this. Quiet, steady, and soft as ocean wind. For so long, I imagined the end of my story would be loud, a storm of applause and vindication. But the truth? It feels more like a sunrise, gentle, certain, inevitable. It's been a year since A Quiet Fire changed everything. A year since Isla Rivera's name vanished from bestseller lists, since my own face began appearing in places I once only dreamed of. But beyond the fame and the features, something deeper happened. I became whole again. This morning, I walked into the same Miami studio where my life had once imploded. The cameras were smaller now, the lights warmer. I wasn't here for damage control or defense. I was here to say goodbye, to the story that made me, and to the pain that once defined me. Maya Cole met me at the entrance, her familiar smile grounding. "Anna," she said, hugging me tightly, "it feels full circle having you back." I nodded. "It does," she grinned. "You ready?" I looked toward the stage, where a single chair and microphone waited beneath a soft golden spotlight. More than ever. When the red light blinked on, I took a deep breath. "Good evening," Maya began, her tone gentle. "We're here today with Anna Stove, author, speaker, and the woman whose story inspired millions. Anna, it's been 1 year. How does it feel now?"